Fuel prices at the pump have fallen to record lows in Kenya, but how will these benefits translate across the board to consumers and businesses? We'll be exploring that particular question and plenty more in the commodities sector in the next half hour, right here on Global Business Africa. I'm Raman Yang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Here's what else is in the pipeline. Egypt has opened the gates for multi-billion-dollar Suez Canal expansion program to foreign investors. And South African Airlines considers Biojet fuel as a cost-cutting measure. Right then, let's start in North Africa, where contrary to initial plans, Egypt's government has now invited foreign investors to take part in the building of the new Suez Canal, the flagship project in President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's program to revive an economy battered by over 3 years of political turmoil. The $8 billion project is aimed at expanding the waterway, which is the fastest shipping route between Europe and Asia. Egypt hopes that the new canal will more than double revenues by 2023 to $13.5 billion a year from around $5 billion a year at present. It also plans to develop some 76,000 square kilometers in the area into an international industrial and logistics hub to attract more ships, more business and of course generate more income and tax revenue as well. Egypt's central bank governor said last September that the state had reached the $8.5 billion funding goal for the project, which it has financed through the issuance of investment certificates in the domestic market.
I would like to welcome all friendly countries to participate in the Suez Canal development project. We're going to work on this project hand in hand with an open mind and with flexible investment regulations that encourage investment in the Suez Canal area.
Now, also in West Africa, the Nigerian stock exchange target to reach $1 trillion market cap by 2016 was essentially torpedoed by the world's biggest decline in equities so far this year. CEO Oscar Onyema pegged the dismal performance of the bourse on the weak naira, the more than 50% fall in global oil prices and election uncertainties that have caused a sell-off in the market when combined together. The NSE All-Share Index was down 3.8% to 28,740.61 points, its lowest in 2 years. That extended its decline in 2015 to 17%. Now, the Naira, on the other hand, that weakened by 10% over the last 3 months, making it the worst performer among 24 African currencies over that window. The bourse will pursue an increase in the number of potential IPOs and share listings this year, while also targeting Nigerians who are living abroad to boost their participation in the market. Withdrawing money from an ATM should be a relatively straightforward procedure, and most of the time it is, as long as you can actually get access to the said ATM. For people who live with disabilities, however, access to public buildings, let alone ATMs in Nigeria, is a problem. One bank in the capital, however, is making it easier for the physically disabled to get access to their cash.
Mercy Omugbayo is on her way to her office. She works at the administrative department of the Federal High Court in Lagos. Born without legs, Mercy defied the odds, earned a postgraduate degree and found permanent employment. But many African cities aren't built with the disabled in mind. Mercy had to stop using her wheelchair because there were hardly any access routes into buildings. One bank in Lagos is now finally catering to the disabled community. The Keystone Bank added ramps to ATM lobbies to enable those with crutches and wheelchairs to easily withdraw money without having to ask for help from banking staff or strangers. It's a simple solution that Mercy says will make her life so much easier.
If I want to talk, maybe I'm going somewhere, I want to take a public bus. Don't enter, we can't carry you, we can't carry you. Some people, few of them will stop, they will allow me to come, and they will drop me where I want to drop. Some will not allow you.
If they are making things easy for us, they should do it here. Anywhere they want to do it, it's okay by me because we have many disabled people in Nigeria. Anywhere it is done, it will be a blessing.
6 years ago, Nigeria's Senate passed a law banning the discrimination of people with disabilities. The law requires government and public institutions to provide convenient access for the disabled, but there's been very little implementation on the ground.
They have skills, they have talents, they have things they can offer, but they are impeded by issues around amenities, issues around a plan for them. So it's something that I want to believe that beyond the government, groups, more banks, more institutions, and indeed people who have the wherewithal will keep planning for them. They don't want to be pitied. They want more of the independence. We're not saying give them a gift. We're saying equip them and provide amenities that make it easier for them to contribute to society and to development.
According to the World Report on Disabilities, nearly 25 million people live with a physical disability. Mercy would like to see more public institutions in her city cater to citizens with physical challenges. Baldi Carlson, CCTV.
Now, at its core, the global aviation industry is all about moving people from point A to point B at the most efficient and cost-effective means, while at the same time reducing the carbon footprint. Now, a lot of development work has gone into better aerodynamics and using new materials to make aircraft lighter and more fuel efficient. For some years now, airline manufacturers have now been working with engineers and other experts to develop cost-effective biological jet fuel. Angela Coppola reports on those developments from South Africa.
It's been several months now since the first seeds were planted on what could be the answer to reducing the cost of jet fuel for South Africa's national flag carrier, SAA. The airline has been working with the manufacturer on a new crop that, if successful, could cut costs significantly. It's part of a global strategy.
The industry has made really aggressive commitments that by 2020 the entire industry will go carbon neutral, and that by 2050 we'll reduce our carbon footprint by 50%, despite the fact that we're basically doubling the number of aircraft flying in the sky today.
And our sustainability analysis on this is that we perform pretty well. So at least 50% reduction compared to fossil fuel. That's the RSB Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterial threshold. We're 100% confident we're going to meet that based on the supply chain that we have right now. And with optimization, we can get to 75 to 80% reduction.
The crop being planted is a tobacco plant, but it's no ordinary tobacco.
Actually, Solaris is a new variety based on a cross-breeding protocol that we did in Italy since 2005. And it's different because it's free nicotine, GMO-free, and is an oil crop.
And scientists are excited about Solaris because initial tests show that its yields per hectare are high.
The current yields that we see in the harvest cycle of Solaris is roughly 3 tons of oil, which is quite significant. We think we can go up with an additional harvest or process efficiencies to roughly 4 tons of oil. Palm oil, as a reference, it's one of the highest yielding oil crops in the world, is at 5 or 6 tons per hectare.
South Africa, of course, has other pressing issues besides making biojet fuel. There is the question of food security, and it's concerning the agricultural sector.
If we're going to play in South Africa, we have 2 products. One is the oil, the other is the cake. So if from 1 hectare you have 3 tons of oil, we have 6 tons of cake feed. It's protein, cattle feed. South Africa is a net import of feed cake.
The difference between planting this crop and what I found previously would be that it's more labor intensive. Okay, getting back to everybody's looking to get people to work, so that's positive.
While reducing the carbon footprint is important, initial tests show that there might well be another benefit.
What we expect to get from a biofuel is a slightly higher energy density too. So not only will we be reducing our carbon emissions, we will have a crop that, or fuel that will be able to fly slightly further or fly slightly more economically. So there will be efficiency gains with the fuel. It also allows us to reduce our exposure to the fluctuations in the fuel price and the fluctuations in our currency.
The good news is that the crop testing is underway. The initial signs are positive and there is no shortage of farmers willing to plant the crop. The challenge is that the harvested crop has to be processed and refined to make the fuel. A multi-billion-dollar refinery will be needed, but it won't be built until the right amount of feedstock is available to make the plant financially sustainable. It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV.
Now, the consumer goods firm Everready, right here in East Africa, posted a full-year loss for the year ending in September, given restructuring measures it took at its Tanzanian division and the shutdown of its main battery manufacturing plant in Kenya. Algeria, East Africa swung into a loss of $2.7 million in the period as sales dropped by 15%. It also says insecurity in Kenya affected various segments of its domestic market during the year. Already booked a one-off cost of about $2.5 million for shutting down its dry cell battery manufacturing plant in the Rift Valley town of Nakuru. That contributed to a 35% rise in financing costs. The company also sells products like flashlights and razors, and it said it would now rely on Energizer's factory in Egypt in order to produce its supplies for sale in Kenya. In 2013, China replaced France to become Algeria's largest trading partner, and the bilateral ties between these two countries continue to grow. The Asian giant is especially involved in infrastructure projects in the North African state. Here's Noel Makugu with more.
From 1992 to 1999, Algeria was busy fighting terrorist groups within the country. But after a reconciliation policy, the North African country has bounced back. Thanks to government reforms, the economy is slowly gaining momentum, and Chinese companies are contributing to the growth of business activity.
China has a good reputation concerning her companies from the perfect realization of projects in terms of speed, high quality and good price.
Besides quality Chinese products and goods and services, the Asian giant also has links to historical, political and cultural reasons.
The first diplomatic relations of Algeria were only with neighboring and Arab countries. China is the first country from non-Arabic world to have established diplomatic ties with Algeria.
China and Algeria are linked by strong political and historical relations. Beijing kept good memories of Algeria. It has supported China to strengthen her position in the United Nations. Thus, China and Algeria's relationship is based on a strong and lasting friendship.
Both Algeria and China have agreed to establish comprehensive strategic partnership moving forward. Noel Makugu, CCTV.
Quick run through equity markets here for you. There are mixed numbers across the board. The NSE in Nigeria ending the day slightly higher. The negative numbers on this board today coming from South Africa. However, on the wider perspective, what we're interested in are the numbers from Kenya. Deal volumes are actually going lower and lower and lower. These are actually much lower than the averages that we're seeing in December last year, with about 80.56 million shares traded in the last week. Ghana is reviewing its 2015 budget estimates given the fall in the global price of oil. We'll still be on energy matters. Pump prices are falling to record lows in Kenya, but how fast will these translate into benefits for clients? Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Food security is a major challenge for most African nations, yet agriculture is a backbone of these economies. But with technologies like hydroponics, there is hope of food availability all year round.
Welcome back. You're still watching Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Now, let's talk about Ghana. Its government is reviewing its 2015 budget estimates following the crash in the global oil price benchmarks, Brent crude and WTI to be specific, all of which will have a very negative impact on the current account balance and foreign exchange reserves in the West African country. It does produce gold, cocoa and oil. It's in talks also with the IMF on a bailout package to stabilize its economy amid runaway inflation and a fairly wide budget deficits. Now, the government based its 2015 budget on a crude price estimate of $99.736 per barrel. Oil, however, is currently trading well below that at around $50 or so a barrel. Ghana started production of oil in 2010. It has a stabilization fund to protect against price shocks. The economy grew at around 8% in recent years due to exports, but GDP growth is expected to slow down in 2015 to just under 4%. Over the past year, it certainly made a name for itself worldwide, and now it's available in 53 countries. Uber is the ride-sharing private car service where all you have to do is tap a button, get a lift, job done. Mark New has the details on how Uber has taken a very bumpy ride on its way to, frankly, an astronomical valuation.
It has been dealing with ongoing public relations fiascos. A 6-year-old girl was hit and killed by an Uber contracted driver, and then details emerged on Uber's marketing program, Operation Slog. Competitors accused Uber of secretly poaching drivers and using its own employees to cancel thousands of competitors' rides.
They are as sharp-elbowed a company as any out there. So they go wherever they want and do what they want. And the question then is, will there be backlash against them?
In September, co-founder Travis Kalanick addressed Uber's reputation as the bad guy.
As you get to a place where people perceive you as the big guy or the man, you have to approach things differently and you have to communicate differently, and we're not there yet.
Uber even hired former Obama campaign manager David Plouffe to be its senior vice president of policy and strategy. Since then, Uber has become even more controversial. Reporters accuse the company of intimidation and tracking them on Uber. And then, rape allegations against Uber contracted driver service in both Boston and New Delhi. But business is business, as the company recently disclosed a valuation of more than $41 billion.
The local transportation is $1 trillion market. Then the 41 billion market cap may be justifiable. Uber is the first player to introduce this service, so they probably have the largest market share today. And so they can demand the market cap they want.
Uber is already in China, but now gets some added firepower with Chinese internet giant Baidu reportedly investing $600 million.
After the Uber service become popular in the United States, there are copycats started to offer the similar service. So there are 3 major companies in China as I know of. The other 2 actually are affiliated with, one with Tencent, the other with Alibaba. So logically for Baidu to be associated with some service company in this area makes sense.
Yang says Baidu will be a big help to Uber, especially with its mapping services. He also says the global taxi industry has always had safety issues, but what's different is that government agencies shared responsibility, while nowadays it appears to be Uber bearing the responsibility of regulating Uber. Mark New, CCTV, Mountain View, California.
Let's move on to East Africa's largest economy. Manufacturers in Kenya telling consumers that they will have to wait for up to 5 months before the prices of goods can come down, despite the recent declines in electricity and fuel costs. The Kenyan Association of Manufacturers said the translation period for prices is normally anywhere between 2 and 5 months, either upwards or downwards, and that of course is dependent on the stability of the cost of energy. However, the Consumer Federation of Kenya has expressed its disappointment in that particular statement. They argue that manufacturers have no sense of urgency whatsoever in lowering their prices in line with the reduced cost of production. On Wednesday this week, the Energy Regulatory Commission slashed the cost of a litre of petrol to just about $1. That's the biggest drop this country's seen since 2010. The cost of electricity has also fallen in the last 3 months after the addition of almost 300 megawatts of far cheaper and greener geothermal energy into the national grid. Now then, we've been speaking quite a bit about the effect of falling oil prices across the board on African economies. Let's focus on Kenya tonight. I'm now joined in studio by Mwandi Anyaga. He's the CEO of Oil and Gas Services. He's with me in studio right now. Thank you for your time. Let's start with Tullow. The numbers came out yesterday. What were your impressions of the results they put out?
Well, I think notable in those results that were reported by Tullow yesterday was a significant cut in the number of wells that will be drilled in 2015. Earlier estimates in 2014, we were starting to talk about almost 20 wells to be drilled every year. But in their projections now, you see that the number of wells has come down to 8 wells to be drilled in 2014. That's a significant drop. And then you can start seeing that the exploration budget is starting to be directed not to wildcat wells, but to appraisal wells. And most of their development budget now is going to be in development of fields which have which are now ready to be put into production. So it's safe to say that exploration budget has been cut quite significantly, and money is being put into areas where discoveries have already been made and pushing that to development.
Right. I'm asking you this question in the context of you running a contracting company now in the oil and gas sector. We've seen BP coming out and saying we're announcing $1 billion revaluation of the firm, we're cutting 200 jobs, we're shedding off about 100 or so contractors. But that's in the wider perspective of things in the North Sea and the Middle East. What's happening in East Africa? Are we seeing a similar trend?
I think we should expect to see a similar trend here in East Africa because again, exploration budgets have been cut, and not just in a small way, but quite significantly. Now, that is certainly going to affect the contracting companies which are working for the oil companies, and we expect to, I mean, people must tighten their belts in 2015 until the oil prices rebound.
But given the fact that we've got this reduction in prices, a reduction in costs, that does raise some interesting acquisition opportunities, doesn't it? I mean, Seplat Petroleum raising, what, $700 million in debt for potential acquisitions.
I know. I mean, one thing you expect right now is that with low oil prices, some companies are going to find themselves with quite significant cash flow constraints. And others are going to find it quite difficult to raise capital for their projected operations. And those kind of companies become good targets for acquisition. And I think that's what companies like Seplat are preparing themselves for.
Let's talk about Kenya. 30+% capital gains tax introduced on the 1st of January this year. Does this make Kenya, on a fundamental basis, a less attractive destination for investment, or is the oil play still strong in the long run?
I would call it a double hit because first, oil prices have come down by over 50% over the last 6 months. That can be seen to theoretically reduce the valuation of exploration assets by 50%. Now, on top of that, what we're saying is that if a company makes a disposal today at that price, which is reduced by 50%, then you still expect to pay another 30% to the government. So it's kind of like coming from again, theoretically, $100 to $20 because you have lower value, and then now you have to pay tax on top of that. So that reduces the attractiveness because obviously the profitability of exploration companies is significantly reduced.
And governments also essentially hitting oil producers with some fairly aggressive production sharing contracts, I understand.
Exactly. So the governments expect to take higher percentages of profit oil. The governments expect to tax exploration assets, and certainly the governments are pushing the exploration companies to perform their work programs within shorter periods. So it's I would say they are kind of getting cornered and
fairly aggressively indeed. Let's talk about the energy bill. They should have gone to Parliament in November last year. That didn't happen, but it's still essentially on the cards, and it does need to get passed. From the perspective of someone who is in the oil industry and someone who used to run the National Oil Corporation in Kenya, what changes do we need to make to that bill before it becomes law?
First, I'll put it from the oil companies' point of view. Oil companies are looking at the bill and looking at the institutional structure that has been set up in the bill. And one thing that oil companies would like to see is the unbundling of the policy making and the licensing function, which in the current bill has been left in the ministry with the power being held by the cabinet secretary. The oil companies would be happier to see if there was an independent licensing authority and the ministry is left as the policy setting body.
Can we take that to ERC, the licensing function?
That's one way of looking at it, but please also note that this bill is also creating an upstream regulatory authority which does everything else in terms of contract compliance, but does not take up the licensing function. So maybe instead of ERC, that upstream regulatory authority would be the one to take up that function. However, in the current bill, the licensing function remains with the ministry. From a service company point of view, especially the local service companies, what they have been looking at is the provisions for local content. A number of players feel that the local content provisions have been left a bit a bit loose and a bit too lenient on the oil companies to decide what to put in their local content plans and what to retain as being sent to international service providers.
All right, so we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your insights. We were just speaking there to Mwendi Anyaga. He's the CEO of Oil and Gas Services right here in Kenya. Let's make a quick run through commodity prices here for you. Seeing a bit of a recovery feeding through into the question here of Brent and WTI crude, 49.37, the relevant number for Brent crude, up about 2 or so percentage points in the last couple of hours of the trading session. We'll keep a close eye on this and, of course, the underlying drivers of that moving forward in the course of the trading day. Recovery as well being seen in gold, but cocoa and coffee not having a decent day at all. On to Madagascar now. Recently, it's enacted a law against the production, the import, the sale and the use of plastic bags in a bid to fight environmental pollution in the country, fairly similar to what Rwanda has done. Now, the ban has received mixed reactions among different stakeholders in the industry. Here's Mahia Mutua with more.
The use and sale of plastic bags is now prohibited in Madagascar. The decree was presented to the government 2 months ago and becomes effective from May the 1st, 2015. Opinions differ following the adoption of the law, which environmentalists say will help fight pollution.
We do not reject change, and we've always cared for the environment anyway. But we would like the state to give us a little more time in this transitional phase so that we can adapt our machines for any changes.
We import 5 tons of raw materials, and 95% of our products are sourced from recycling.
Subsequent plant closures will render hundreds jobless in a country still recovering from a political unrest that nearly brought the economy to its knees.
We are afraid because we will lose our jobs. What will we do if we ban the bags? What are we going to feed our family?
According to studies, Antananarivo produces 500 to 700 tons of garbage per day. 82% of this waste is plastic bags, a lower level compared to countries with richer economies. In recent years, fabric bags have been emerging in the Madagascan markets, but are still struggling to find their place in the consumer chain. Africa is currently the leading continent globally in the crackdown of plastic bags. Mali and Mauritania banned plastic bags in 2013. Mahia Mutua, CCTV.
And in the week when the Naira hit yet another record low, that's it for this edition of Global Business. We'd like your feedback on the program. Send your feedback to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. And of course, when we're offline, Facebook and Twitter are your ports of call. We'll see you next week on Monday. Thank you for watching. I'm Ramanya.